Hi, I'm Tom Mihawk, and welcome back to the Optimizing Personal Finance podcast. I'm thrilled to have today guest Johnny Rosito. Johnny, like all my previous guests, and I suspect many or maybe all in the future, will be our students, either current or former students. And, you know, in the world of podcasting, there's so many podcasts. I don't have a producer. I don't have anyone working with me on these. And I meet interesting people who have great ideas, great experience to share. I don't know if this is true, but my sense is that people find what they relate about their experience easier to approach. And in Johnny's case, Johnny was in my summer investments and insurance, retirement, estate planning, the two courses at University of Massachusetts. And Johnny wrote well and interestingly about his family's and his activities in investment real estate. And it's been my experience that investment real estate is a bit of an arcane art. Not that it's not available to everybody. We're going to ask Johnny to talk about that. But it's like if you want to be a good golfer, you got to play and you got to learn some technique and you got to take some lessons. And, you can't just go out and whack a ball. I mean, you'll get better than the average person, but you may not ever get good enough to enjoy it unless you play and learn some technique and some ins and outs. And it's my experience that investment real estate is like that. You have to learn some ins and outs, know what to look for and some things like that. A couple of things first. Johnny was an undergrad at Fairfield University, earned a Bachelor of Arts there. He works now for a marketing research firm in Cambridge, Mass. Great town, Boston, right? Johnny makes bow ties, and he's going to show us some before we get into the meat of the discussion. He also enjoys playing rugby. He doesn't look tough, but he must be. And he also enjoys investing. These are all characteristics of interesting people. And so we're thrilled to have him. John, please tell us something about some of your interests and add anything that you want, by the way. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. No, happy to be here. Like Tom said, was in your course over the summer and just relayed some of my experiences within real estate. So, happy to be here. To do a quick plug of the bow ties that Tom mentioned, right? So basically what I do is it's called Johnny Rosito handcrafted neckwear. We take sentimental fabrics and high-end fabrics and repurpose them to make bow ties.
What does that mean, sentimental fabrics?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, if some of my clients will send in potentially, like I had one of my clients send in a scarf that had their family tartan,
fabulous. I forgot that.
Yeah. So what I was able to do was I was able to make a few bow ties out of that, right? And give it to him and his family. So, basically custom pieces for people that, if there's a old shirt or something that you really loved, you can't use anymore, you want to repurpose it, we can make a bow tie out of it. Anything like that. Any real fabric, could be comforter fabric, anything like that. So
I'm thinking of, it's interesting. I'm thinking of making a black bow tie out of a high school football jersey.
Could totally do it.
I've got a black, dark black, it's probably worn high school football jersey. I never get out, but it's a keepsake that I won't throw away, and I'll probably take it with me to my grave.
Yeah.
My children will probably be throwing it away one day going, oh, what is this thing? That would make a good bow tie. I forgot about that.
That's exactly it, right? So that's the concept, basically taking things that you don't wear anymore, don't fit into anymore, or maybe a loved one had, or you'd like to create something for a loved one.
What a cool idea.
Yeah.
What gave you that idea?
Well, that's a good question as well. Really, it all happened when I was looking for bow ties for my own wedding and couldn't find a print that worked, that I was really interested in. And essentially just went online, bought fabric that was actually it's the official tartan plaid for the state of Connecticut, which I didn't know existed, but it looked really cool. And bought that fabric and sewed the bow ties for my groomsmen and everything. And I've been sewing since I was little. When I was in the Boy Scouts, I would sew my merit badges onto my, onto my sash. And ever since then, just been sewing all sorts of things. So,
Johnny, that's cool. I'd forgot. Yeah. I knew when we prepared, we would have a brief discussion about this. I'd forgotten about about the sentimental fabric. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So they look like this.
Yeah, show us, please.
So they just,
Yeah.
that's
Now,
one. That's
what is that one made of?
This is made of out of an old shirt. A lot of these are made out of old dress shirts, and they all come. They're all basically untied that you can tie them. They're adjustable, but
Yep.
the best thing is that once you tie it once, you never need to untie it because you can just unclasp, right,
Huh.
put it around your neck, adjust it, and then clasp it back. So really cool. It's a little side project, right? Has a little, logos on there and everything. So yeah, no, it's
That's
fun.
terrific.
It's fun.
I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
I'm a big who knows if it continues. We're now in the age of Instagram and Twitter and all these things, and who knows if the whole side project hustle will continue, or people one day will look and go, why in the world do people want to work 4 or 5 jobs at one time? I don't know, but at this point, as an instructor in personal finance, I'm a big proponent. If you can find a way to do something that, to monetize something you have an interest in and you're good at, and you can use, certainly if you can use, technology to create a market for yourself, which one person can theoretically do globally, why not try?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I feel like it has to be a passion. So if you're in an industry that, doesn't necessarily spark passion and you have a side passion, you can always do that and start a little business and, spread your passion with others. So.
Well, look, if you go through the average day, how many people do you meet that have passion? It's nice to meet somebody who's passionate about something and
Sure.
interested in something and willing to talk it up. I think that's a neat thing.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah,
let's jump
appreciate it.
in if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
I'm thrilled to have you. I appreciate you taking the time on an afternoon to do this. Tell us about how you started in investment real estate. Did you have influences? Did you just pick up a book? Did family members? I mean, I know the answer, but
Yeah.
but I'm interested to hear you relate your exposure to investment real estate.
Yeah. So Tom, it really started with my grandparents. I as a young child, I witnessed how real estate basically provided income for my mother and her family. So my grandfather invested in commercial real estate in Stamford, Connecticut. Also built multifamily apartments on top of that commercial real estate. So that's really what he did. And my
Did he do
parents,
this full time?
yeah, that was
So he
his
did full
job.
time, but your dad and you
Hmm.
have continued the interest in investing in
Hmm.
real estate, but have had other jobs.
Yep, yep.
Right.
So that's the thing, right? I've had exposure to kind of both ends, right? It could be a full-time job where that is solely what you do. You invest in real estate and it pays for your expenses. And the other avenue is, right, you can have a 9 to 5 job, and then you can find real estate on the side and kind of have it subsidize some of your expenses and,
Yeah.
and eventually pay down the road. So
Tell us some stories about when you were young and your experience. Did you do any hands-on labor? Did you collect any rents? Did you meet any tenants? What kinds of things did you do as a young person that paved some of your way into this interest?
yeah, no, that's a great question. So ever since I was, could remember, I would be going with my father to the, investment condo property that they have, and fixing pipes, changing out light bulbs, just getting your hands dirty.
What was the dirtiest job you did?
Well, when one of the tenants moved out, and we were in between tenants, right? The place hadn't been updated really for about probably 15 years. We had a tenant in there for 15 years, and then we wanted to update it before putting it back on the market to rent out, to increase the rent that we'd receive. And I would say, I mean, we basically tore everything down in the kitchen, basically to the studs, and did a whole bunch of work, right? So we did plumbing. We put a new ceiling in, we put new cabinets in, new sink, and all that. And really, the main thing to take away from that is that it may seem like a big job, but with the internet, right? And if you just take your time, you can really do anything.
How does the internet help?
Yeah. So, and we spoke about this before, right? It's based.
As we were preparing.
Yeah, of course. Yep. Um, the internet just has a wealth of information. So you can look on YouTube, right? And you can get different ideas based on, what you're looking at. So basically, if we're looking to install a cabinet and we haven't done it before, you can look at the specific make and model, exactly what you're purchasing, and someone will probably show you exactly what to
And
do.
are you likely to be misled, or are you likely to surprisingly find pretty accurate, pretty talented people videoing themselves doing a project that's pretty darn close to what you're doing?
Yeah, I'd probably say the latter, right? I think you will find people that know exactly what they're doing, and you can even look on their page and see, okay, what are some other videos that they have, right? Is this their first video, or is this, have they done a bunch, and are they, experts in installing, kitchen cabinets and stuff like that? So, and that's another thing too, right? You can kind of compare. So if you watch one video and you're not sure if that's really the correct way to do it, you can watch another one from someone else, and if it aligns, then that's probably the right way to do it.
I related a story to you as we were preparing
Yeah.
a few days ago or a week, when I forget, but whenever that was. And I told you that I had a kitchen faucet. So we have an island, and we have this, Moen kitchen faucet, and it's probably now 20 years old, but they haven't changed that much, as a single handle. And it looks nice. It's very architectural. And I forget, it started leaking or something, I forget. And I watched a YouTube video, like maybe three times. And I got up at 5 o'clock, started at 5:30. I knew it was an involved project, and it includes taking this cartridge out of the center. That's the way these things work. The cold and the hot water come up through the center, and this cartridge facilitates the handle mixing or using all hot or all cold or whatever. And there are a few steps that were challenging for me. As I got the old one out, some water came out, and I was prepared. I knew that was going to happen, but nevertheless, it starts coming out. You're like, oh no! I thought it was like in a Three Stooges, movie, right? Oh no, here comes the water. Yeah. But it didn't come out quite that much. Nevertheless, I had the towels, and then I got the other one in, and you have to hammer this thing in, but you don't want to break it. And then once you get it, you have to get it the right way and get the hot and the cold to be on the right side. And there's certain clips that go, but surprisingly, the YouTube video, I shouldn't say surprisingly, amazingly, the YouTube video was very accurate. I watched it a few times. I actually, I'm a detailed guy. I took notes. I knew exactly what my steps were going to be. And I put it together, and I probably saved myself $400 or $500 or something. And my wife was moderately amazed.
That's exactly it, right? You seem like a magician, right? But
you seem like a magician.
You can watch the video, and really anything can be done. Really anything. So.
Tell us about, you started to mention, or you did a moment ago, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, demolition. Which of these things can you do? Which do you subcontract out? Should you, if you're watching this podcast, if you feel like, I don't really, I'm not that handy, or I'm moderately handy. I mean, obviously, if you're really handy, that's probably great. But for those that are not that handy or only moderately handy, can you tackle these kinds of things, and how do you do it?
Yeah, I would say yes, you could. The only thing that I have not done would be electrical. So, if there's specialty things where it's
because of danger, or because of the licensing required, or what?
Both, really. If you're not careful with the electrical, you could get hurt. As well as licensing and permits and stuff.
Permits.
Like that, right?
I meant to say that too, right? The permits.
Yeah, if you're looking to get electric heating out to a different room that didn't have it before, you really want to follow those steps, and you want to get a professional in there, at least to tell you what they're going to do, and utilize their expertise for that. But I would say anything else, right? Like you said, the changing the handle and the faucet on the sink, ripping out floors, putting new floors in, things like that. I really feel like anybody can do. And I have friends that aren't that handy and have done jobs like that, right? So if you're just okay with getting dirty and okay with taking the time and going through the process to make sure that you're doing it effectively, I think anybody with two hands can do most of the work.
Are you way ahead time-wise and financially if you can do it all yourself? Does it make, is there any merit in subcontract, in hiring tradespeople to do this stuff, even if you can do it? Or are you really clearly ahead if you can do it all on your own?
I think it depends. I would say if you are not close to your rental property, contracting out may be your only option. If you if you can make money in other ways during that time, like basically the opportunity cost of going to your property to fix something for 4 hours. If you can make more money somewhere else, then
If it takes you 4 hours to change a light bulb, you should contract it out.
Right. But if you're okay with on a Saturday or a Sunday going on your day off or taking a day off to go fix something, I think it's definitely advantageous to do that. Not only because it saves you money, but also because you're able to better understand your own property. And I kind of relate it to when I was fixing a motorcycle that I purchased. Actually, a buddy gave to me. Wasn't running, nothing. I had to fix everything on the bike, right? So I could have brought it to a mechanic and I could have had them do everything. It would have cost me a lot of money, but it would have been done. And I would have been probably had it sooner than when I was doing the work. But I decided to do all the work. And through doing that, I was able to learn all the ins and outs of that specific motorcycle. So when I was riding it later, right, if something seemed off, I knew exactly what it was because I touched it with my own two hands. Same thing applies in my eyes to property, right? If you're in there and you know how everything's wired, right? You may not touch the wiring, but you know exactly how everything's wired. Or if you know exactly the types of floors that are in there or the sink and all that, or all the appliances, you're more educated on your own property. I think it's more valuable.
And that leads me to beyond sort of these trades talents, plumbing and electrical and these things, which, we know exist in every piece of real estate, actually.
Mm-hmm.
What talents would you say someone should have, or what interests? Not just making money. I mean, that's certainly one. Mm-hmm. But what kinds of things do you think people should, what are the giveaways? What are the tells? What are the things that, somebody's sitting and waiting to catch a flight and they're thinking about, boy, I'd like to have money work for me when I'm not working, or boy, I think I could move out of my condo into the home that, we're about to move into, and we could keep the condo. Or, there are all these properties in this section of town that's gentrifying and renovating. Mm-hmm. And boy, if I get in now, I could buy 3 of them for a song and just do a little bit of work. And boy, I'd have some extra. What are the kinds of things that if people are daydreaming about this stuff, mm-hmm. that give them the confidence to say, yeah, maybe I should try this? What kind of talents and interests should people have?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I would say, it really depends on like what your risk tolerance is. That's kind of what I equate it to.
Do you view this as risky?
Not as risky as other investments. So I think it's almost like middle of the road, really, to me, right? So you can either put your money into a bond or an index fund for retirement. That'll pay you down the road, or, provide you coupons with a bond before it matures. Or you can invest in NFTs and not really know where that's going to go, right?
I thought they were they're only going up, aren't they?
Maybe, right? Who knows? Now, but see, with real estate, how I view it, right? It's been a creator of wealth. More people have created wealth, I believe, through real estate than
why? Why?
I think it's
no. I think I know the answer, and I think you do too. Yeah. Tell us.
Well, I would say, right, because it's you sit. It doesn't take a lot of money to invest into a property.
Why? Because
you can leverage.
Exactly, which means if I'm buying a $200,000 property, all I only need is 40,000. And if times are weird, like in 08 and 2008, 2009, you might not need anything.
Right. Right.
And now that potentially led to, the financial crisis, but nevertheless, those were crazy times and banks were all competing, and that's what happened.
Yeah. I think
so you have leverage, number one.
Yep.
What else? I don't mean to put you on the spot. People have to live in these things.
Yes.
Right? I mean, and that's a question I want to get to also, which is where do you choose and how, I'm going to get to that one also, but
sure.
You got people have to live in them, leverage.
I mean, cash flow is a big thing as well. That's probably the biggest thing about real estate in my eyes. It's almost more important than building equity in the home. I really do believe that, because you're getting paid on a consistent basis. And that's, we'll probably get into this later, but if you have multifamily homes, I'd say that's probably the best real estate that you can have.
I've heard that too.
You're hedging your bets, right? So say you're let's just use basic numbers. I hate to use basic numbers because every individual situation is completely unique, right? With the numbers, but say you have 3-family home and you're making a profit of 30%, right? Or let's say a little higher. So if one tenant moves out or stops paying, you have an issue with that one unit, you're still even and you can cover the expenses.
Because of the other 2 units.
Because of the other 2 units. Instead of a single family home, it's all or nothing in that home, right?
Johnny, tell us this. I use this example when I teach, right? I say, you own your own home and it breaks and you call the plumber or you fix it yourself, but when it's someone else's property that you own, when it's your property that someone else is living in, and when their furnace goes or the toilet backs up, they call you. And I'm interested to know, and I use that as an example, and and look, you have to be, as an instructor, you got to be a little bit dramatic once in a while to make an impression, get a point across. But nevertheless, how often in your experience, your parents, your grandparents, do you get calls at 3 a.m, the toilet's clogged, you got to come. The furnace blew up, there's water all over the basement. There's this leak in the ceiling, it's dripping right into my son's bedroom, you got to get here now. And it's, the day before a big presentation at work, or the day before, it's 3 a.m. and you're flying out at 5 to go, on some business trip or whatever. How often does that sort of thing happen?
I would say hardly never. It has never happened in that fashion, right? So even if it's a catastrophic event, if you would say, right, like the furnace goes or something, it's when you're dealing with other, at least in my experience, you're dealing with other human beings, right? So they know that it's 3 a.m. and they don't want to, they're not going to.
Oh, interesting. So they're courteous.
Right. Yes. In my experience. Now, that's not all experiences, right? You might get a horrendous tenant that, calls you because there's cobwebs under the steps or something like that, like little things, right? So that could happen. Right. But in my experience, nothing major like that has ever been, a do or die situation where you
help me understand though. I'm just listening to you. I'm thinking, but how can that be? So all these podcasts and all these videos I've done for my courses, I mean, they do this from a room in my home. This is my study, and I feel as if in my home, I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs, but it's no different than the Boston suburbs, the Cleveland suburbs, or the Miami suburbs. There's always something that needs doing. I've got, now, in fairness, my wife and I bought a crappy house in a good neighborhood. We were reasonably handy people. We did a ton of stuff. We ripped stuff out. We repainted, and this room I painted all myself. I think I may not have done some of this trim, but and we redid all these windows. When the windows we first moved in, they were like guillotines. They were like, well, we replaced all the windows with energy saving, all that stuff. But it took us a while. We've lived here a while. But my point is, there's always something. There's trees that have to be trimmed. Or how is it possible that you can own investment real estate and not always have something that needs to be done? And we were talking about an emergency, and maybe that's it. So,
and I feel like with people who are renting, right? There's a different mentality to the property than if you own, right? So with the renter being there all the time, right? They're not, a lot of renters aren't so much concerned about the specific windows that you have or the type of paint that you have, right? Or that there's crown molding or there's not crown molding, right? It's different when it's your own home and you want to make updates for your own living. But when it's a renter, they're like, hey, it's a roof over my head. I have everything I need, right? It's
It's
a
an
modern,
interesting point. Yeah.
right? So
They're
that's
not worried
what,
about trimming. I mean, we've got,
right.
we have you can see it out the window. We've got a relatively wooded lot. Or let's say we're 1/3 wooded and 1/3, lawn.
Mhm.
And these trees need work once in a while. They grow, and they're not inexpensive to trim back. It just happens that, right, and we own the home in the period of the 25 years. Our home is about 60 years old. And so the wood, the trees, all these things kind of last a certain amount of time. And then the people who own it in that period are the ones that have to make these repairs. That was
Sure.
part of our opportunity, though. We got the house, I think, at a great price
Right.
in a neighborhood that has great other homes and we have great schools, and we're 30 minutes from our airport and 30 minutes from Philadelphia downtown. I mean, we have lots of medical and education, universities around,
Right, sure. Well, another thing, Tom, is right, if you own a condo, right, that is something where there's HOA fees that really you cover within the rent that you're charging. If hopefully you choose a property where your
Interesting.
expenses can be covered, right?
Does that usually work? You can cover the HOA fees and the rent.
That normally, right? I mean, that's
So you're
a
not
lead
doing
time.
snow removal. You're not putting down
No,
salt. You're not trimming
right.
shrubs.
And technically, the tenant is paying for those services,
Huh?
right? Because it's part of the rent. So that's a way that you can work
Interesting.
it, right, with the numbers. If you're crunching the numbers, you make sure that that is included in the expenses that you're considering, right, for owning that property. And
I've
then,
shoveled and plowed snow more than I want to. And
yeah,
it's, invariably you're doing that at 6:30 or 7:30 a.m. because you got to get out, and
Mhm.
interesting. Well, that's
Yeah,
great. What are you seeing now, Johnny? If you were to say, where's the market today? What's happening today?
Mm.
What are you seeing in terms of opportunities and anything new that maybe would surprise your grandparents in what's happening in investment real estate today?
yeah. Well, I'd say with homes in general, and I think we've all seen it, right? I mean, the prices have risen substantially. I've seen that it's starting to come down a little bit in certain areas, especially in Connecticut, right? You see houses that maybe have been listed for now maybe a month or 2 months. So you see that it has peaked and now it's kind of coming down a little bit, level setting a little bit. But really, I think there's a few factors, right? So most people got stimulus checks, right? Most people weren't commuting for a long time or had a pause on their debts. So like student loans, some people had that pause. So people had more dispensable income, right? And want to get out of the cities and want to move into homes and want to have a yard, right? So that created that inflation with the housing market.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think,
And people didn't have to be, you could work in New York City. Your office could be in New York City, but you don't have to be commuting in New York City anymore. You can live in
to be in
Austin,
Alabama,
Texas, or Cincinnati, or
right?
Miami, or whatever, and work out of New York City. And that's kind of the way companies are going.
Right, right. I mean, my company just announced work anywhere, right? Like a
Really?
work anywhere. So they were going to do 3 to 5 days, or sorry, 3 days in, 2 days out. And we're going to kind of do a hybrid. But they just announced very recently that they're going to just do they're calling it, I think, a work anywhere plan, right? So we're seeing in general industries change, right? Like you said, but also with interest rates so low and staying really
For
low
now,
for now, right?
let's hope, let's see.
For now, people can take out mortgages and because money is so cheap, right? Money is so cheap right now. So even though the house is 30% more expensive than it was a year ago, if you can borrow at at what seems like a discounted rate, a very low rate, right? You're not paying so much interest in the long term. So I think those are a few factors, just from my view on what's been happening in the housing market. I still think there's opportunity though.
Quick aside, how's the whole Airbnb thing impacted rental investment real estate?
Hmm. Well, I think it just opens up another door for people who are considering renting out, their home. So, I mean, you can even get a taste of it. I don't know if I would do this. We don't really have the space, but you can rent out a room in your home, almost like subletting, just for vacationers, right? If you wanted to, or if you see that the rates in Airbnb, if you get a investment property that's in a well-desired area or a vacation area, you can use it as your own vacation home, but then you can also, have people live there on the weekends. And I think the rates with Airbnb, you can get people living, if you do the numbers right, you could have someone there only 2 weekends a month and it'll pay for all your expenses.
Have you seen people buying properties solely for rental using Airbnb or something like that?
Sure. No, no one.
I don't know what the competitor is to Airbnb, but I'm just thinking of not like the condo that's in your neighborhood that and you know who lives there. Not personally, but the type of people who would want to live there based on its location. I mean, somebody says, I see this property and it's in the middle of the country and the price is right, and I can Airbnb this thing because it's near the Indy 500 or it's near Green Bay, Wisconsin for football games, or whatever, something like that. It's near the Masters or something.
Sure. I don't know anyone personally who's done that with Airbnb. It's been basically traditional rentals. Sign a lease, 1-2 year lease. Most leases are just 1 year that I've seen with people.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's an interesting concept, and it's something that's new, right? Relatively new for rentals. So, I mean, if anything, if you own 2 homes and you're not renting out your vacation property, it could be a way to kind of subsidize and help pay for some bills or help pay for your own mortgage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's try this one. You and I talked about this in the prep. How do you find a property? Does it need to be in your area? Does it need to be in a neighborhood that you know? Would you look if you were living in Connecticut or Mass and working in Cambridge like you? Would you look in Indiana or Alabama or Texas, where you happen to read or hear or someone told you that, costs are good and the neighborhood's good and, renters are plentiful and honest and decent or whatever?
I truly believe, at least with my experience, right, I want to be close to the property that I invest in.
Why?
I think a few reasons. So one is so that if something does happen, I can go, right? And two,
Right. Yep.
two, because you really know where you live. Like if you've lived in the area, you could say, oh yeah, that looks like an up and coming area. I pass that street all the time. I know exactly who's there, right? You know the type of demographic, you know what kind of business is there personally, right? And I think that's very important, at least for me.
It's a little bit like doing the work on your motorcycle.
Right. If you're familiar with the area, you're familiar with the school systems, you might have had friends that went to that school, that schooling system. You might have went to that schooling system and you enjoy it. Or that the downtown looked like X and now it looks like Y, and you've seen the development. So I think keeping a close eye of what's around you is probably the easier approach. And it just makes it easier for you in the long run.
For someone looking to do this who, is not doesn't have a fund that they've raised, is not applying, $50 million to this, but someone who works, has a job, but doing sufficiently well, what kinds of things do they need to look for? You just talked, for example, maybe think of this, you just talked about know the neighborhood, know the schools, know the people who live in that neighborhood. What kinds of things should people be looking for when they're choosing a property? Talk about maybe price, you mentioned multifamily before. Is it more work, multifamily? I mean, these kinds of things.
Yeah, well, first off, right, you brought up multifamily, and it's interesting you brought up, is it more expensive? Because in a way it potentially can be, because instead of one toilet to fix, you're going to have 3 or 4, right? But at the same time, still one roof, right? So there are certain things that are more advantageous for multifamily, and some other things that you might have to get your hands dirty a little bit more. But I mean, my biggest suggestion is just to stay within your means, right? I personally don't want to overstretch. So If your price range really determines on how much you're willing to put down, and I would suggest, right, putting down 20% so you don't have to pay extra fees and extra
So if
insurance.
I only have $20,000, I'm only looking at $100,000 properties.
That's how, yeah, it's with me, at least. It's like, and that's fine. You can find things for $100,000, right? You might be able to find a single family.
In Cambridge, Mass?
Cambridge, Mass, maybe. I don't know. I'm not so close to, like, I don't live right next to Cambridge, right? So I'm not sure. But I think it's all about getting started, and it's okay to start with $100,000 home, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's really staying within your means. I mean, the best place to be in is if you have enough savings where you can buy a house outright. That's a specific situation. But say you can buy something outright. Say you have $200,000 and you can purchase the home. Leveraging may still not be a bad idea, right? Put $40,000 in, keep some money in the bank to potentially invest in other things or other properties, right? And if something happens at that property, you have the money to be able to fix it and pay it right there. So
I made an investment in private equity, and the drawdowns, and it's to describe it here, it goes beyond here. But the drawdowns were when my kids were in college, and I can remember, like, oh no, I've got a cash call. Oh no, and tuition's due. But I made it through somehow, and then I had about 5-7 years. I even got a distribution this year. Talk for a moment. I've got two more questions. This is not one of them. I have two more, and then we'll wrap up. But talk for a moment, because you started to talk about it. How is it to have income come in when you haven't had to work for it? Now, I'm not saying that owning a property is not work. Your money's working for you, like my investment in private equity. But there is a special experience that I've into this, certainly in this to this level, that I've only experienced with this kind of an investment, where I struggled to make these cash calls, but did. And then these payments started coming in, and I got an IRR of over 11 years of about 21%. I got, I think, 3 times my cash back, I think, or 2.5. I hope I don't have that wrong, but it's in that range. It worked out very well. And it is a special feeling. And I think you could communicate that, because you've got a similar thing. And in your case, when private equity, I don't know when it's going to happen. In your case, it's coming in monthly.
Right.
Which is, and you mentioned this about your grandmother, I think, and your mom too, and what it meant for those families.
Yeah, no, it's like we said, cash flow is probably the number one thing with real estate, right? Because, and as you said, right, if you're able to put some money aside and invest in yourself, right, you get that continual ongoing payment. And it's as if you're working a 9-to-5 job, but you don't have to. Someone else is working a 9-to-5 job and paying you rent, and you're taking that money in. It's almost like having a side hustle. It is a side hustle in a way, right?
And it wasn't, and I don't think it by any stretch, it doesn't make you, in my experience, make you lazier. It makes you more productive. It's like, wait, I don't have the burden. I'm still working my regular job.
That's right.
It's funny. I met, I recently was speaking to some founders of startup businesses, and they called it their W-2, not at their day job. They called it their W-2. So you still have your W-2, right? And you're still working hard at that. But then you've got this other thing that gives you breathing room and gives you a chance to, and it could mean for you, college for kids, or wife stays home and raises kids, or bigger home in a safer neighborhood, or, who knows?
Another investment property.
Another investment property. Right.
You can continue to build. And I think that's the key, right? You want to make money while you're sleeping, and real estate can provide that to you.
Yeah.
If you don't have the opportunity to potentially put money in, or you haven't put money into retirement yet, I mean, it's my experience that, if you're funding your retirement and you're doing all those basic things that I feel are necessary for investing, you can then have real estate, as an addition, right? But say you want to put more into your retirement. Well, if you have a real estate investment that's paying you and you're net positive on that payment, and you can actually making some money every month, you can take that money, you can invest it anywhere you want. You can put it into retirement. Like you said, you can fund your kids' college fund, and all that. So
or take a family vacation, or
Do whatever you want.
do part that and part invest in more real estate.
Yep.
The first of the last two
Yeah.
questions. Do you need any specific relationships, tradespeople, accountants, lawyers, or real estate brokers, or who do you develop relationships with that make this kind of activity more successful?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. I think you meet people along the way, right? So I think in my experience, I do have relatives that are contractors and things like that as well. So that's helped. That's helped big time. But even if you don't have anyone in your life that has those specific traits and trades, reaching out to your network and seeing who else may have invested in real estate in that area and getting names and getting reference to other people, that's essential, right? So I would say, because if you can do the work yourself, it's not as essential, but having those people in your back pocket, I think, is just a good practice.
One thing I've thought about, I would add, is I think it's really helpful to have good tax help. And it's not that specialized. It just means that I think real estate investing, because you have depreciation and other things like that, that you have at home, but most people don't think about it much. They try to keep their receipts, and they hand in the receipts, and then they have a tax event one day in their life, and that's it. Where when you're owning properties, I think the cash flow impact is magnified by the tax benefits. And so not only do you need good records, but you need somebody to say, Johnny, think about this, or Johnny, try that, or maybe own a property in Mass, but not in Connecticut, or own 3 in Mass and own 1 in Connecticut if you have a choice, or whatever. And I think that kind of help is really useful. Here's my last one for you. When's the best, for all the people who we hope will watch this podcast, when's the best time to start this kind of investing and activity for your future?
Yeah. I would say that it's probably, for me, sooner the better, right? Because you got to look at real estate as a long-term investment, right? So you have to kind of look at it as like potentially 30-year investment. What is the saying? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago or something,
And then the second best time is
right.
The best time is 15 years ago, and the second best time is today.
Yes, right.
Or yesterday.
So I think, if you've ever thought about real estate, right? If you've ever investigated a little bit, plenty of people do it. And I think that the best time is now. And you just have to make sure that you're set up in a way where you're comfortable investing in it. So if you're comfortable leveraging and you're comfortable kind of getting your hands dirty and experiencing it, there's no better time than now. I think the best thing about investment real estate is, if you own a home that you live in, I would consider it a liability. If you own a home that you're renting and it's investment, it can be considered an asset.
You've been reading Rich Man, Poor Man.
Yeah. So, right. I mean, it's a, basic concept, but it makes sense, right? So,
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's clearly both are assets from an accounting standpoint, the way we account for them. But your point is, in the scheme of a personal finance way of thinking about the way you run your life, I'm with you. I get it.
Right. Yeah.
Is there anything that you can think of I overlooked in my questions for you, Johnny? I really appreciate you doing this. And I thought about these questions. I tried to go through and the kind of thing that would make for an interesting, relatively brief topic, podcast. Anything you'd like to add that you think would be useful?
Yeah, no, I just, thanks for having me on. I hope the information that, we shared back and forth is beneficial to some people. And, if anyone has any additional questions or wants to talk, feel free to reach out to me, or, I'll extend it to you, Tom, as well. Right. But, if anyone wants my contact information, feel free to give it out. Great discussion. And hopefully you'll invite me for another podcast,
Terrific, Johnny.
on a different subject.
I will clearly be promoting this for the course that we're doing now, which is at University of Massachusetts, our Introduction to Personal Finance and our Cash Management course. But I post these at my YouTube channel, and it's amazing. They get watches, And so I appreciate you being a guest. You've been terrific. It's always fun to do these with fun people. And so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Johnny, take care and have a great rest of the weekend.
You too. All right. Have a
Take
good
care
one.
and stay well.
Take care.